The clippers stopped. Lila Vance unsnapped the cape and brushed the loose hair from the old man's collar. He reached for his wallet, hands trembling. She placed her palm over his and shook her head. "This one's on me, sir." His eyes filled. He nodded once, slow and heavy, and walked out without a word. Moments later, her boss called her into the back office. The door closed. Through the glass, Monica Hale's hands sliced the air like blades. Lila walked out carrying her bag and her clippers. Fired. Over a free haircut. But that old man wasn't just anybody. And what happened next, nobody saw coming. Let's go back to before that haircut changed everything. The alarm didn't go off. It didn't need to. Lila Vance was already awake, standing in the narrow kitchen of a one-bedroom apartment she shared with her grandmother. The iron hissed against her salon smock, pressing each crease flat with the kind of care most people reserve for Sunday church clothes. On the refrigerator behind her, a chore chart written in purple marker, a photograph of her late grandfather in army dress uniform, and an overdue electric bill held up by a magnet shaped like a cross. Etta Vance shuffled in wearing slippers and a housecoat, already mid-sentence before her feet hit the linoleum. "You're ironing that thing like it's a wedding dress. They don't pay you enough for all that pressing." Lila smiled without looking up. "Grandma, presentation is half the job. The other half is tips." Etta opened the fridge, stared into it like it owed her something, and closed it again. And last month's tips didn't cover the light bill. She wasn't wrong. Lila knew exactly how much was in the checking account. $211. Rent was $885. The math didn't work. It hadn't worked for some time. But she pressed the smock anyway, hung it on the door hook, poured Etta a cup of coffee, 1 sugar, no cream, and grabbed her bag. "I'll figure it out, Grandma." "You always say that." "Because I always do." Etta watched her granddaughter walk out the front door into the gray morning light and said nothing. But her hand rested on the photograph on the fridge, the one of Lila's grandfather, Staff Sergeant Amos Vance, who spent years cutting hair for every soldier in his unit and never charged a dime for it. The bus came late. It always came late. Lila stood at the stop with her earbuds in, watching the neighborhood scroll past through fogged glass, boarded-up storefronts, a corner store with iron bars on the windows, a mural of a black girl with butterfly wings that someone had painted over the summer, and no one had bothered to tag. Churchill was changing. New coffee shops on one block, plywood on the next. Gentrification moved like water, slow, steady, and selective about what it touched. Prestige Salon and Spa sat right on that edge, glass front, white lettering, lavender in the window boxes. From the outside, it looked like it belonged 3 neighborhoods over. Inside, it smelled like developer and eucalyptus and money. Lila's station was the smallest one, tucked near the back next to the supply closet. She'd been there for some time. In that time, she'd built a clientele that specifically requested her. Women who drove from across town, men who trusted no one else with a fade. Her hands were precise, patient. She could look at someone's head and see what it needed before they said a word. But skill didn't buy you a bigger station. Seniority did. And Monica Hale, the salon owner, measured loyalty in silence, not talent. Lila opened her station drawer and touched the notebook she kept underneath the combs and clips. Soft black cover, pages dense with sketches. Floor plans, chair layouts, a hand-drawn logo. Vance's, her barber shop, the one she'd open someday. A place where anyone could sit down regardless of what was in their wallet. She'd been building this dream on paper since cosmetology school, where she graduated with honors and debt that followed her like a second shadow. She closed the drawer when she heard Monica's heels clicking across the floor. "Lila, A word. Monica pulled her aside near the reception desk. Fresh flowers had appeared on the counter overnight. New signage in the window. Something was happening. I need you to focus on booked clients only this week. No walk-ins, no freebies, no exceptions. Monica's voice was low but sharp. We have a big opportunity coming. A corporate event planner wants to book the salon for a political fundraiser. Important people. Do you understand? Lila nodded. Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. After Monica clicked away, a coworker leaned over from the next station. She just doesn't want the wrong people in here when the money shows up. Lila didn't respond, but her eyes drifted to the empty chair by the window, then to the front door, where anyone could walk in. Anyone at all. She didn't know it yet, but someone was about to. The next afternoon, the front door of Prestige Salon swung open, and the wrong person walked in. Silas Reed stood in the entrance like a man who'd already decided he didn't belong. He was older, clean, but worn jacket, a military veteran pin on the left lapel, trousers pressed thin at the knees. His hair was long and uncombed, curling past his ears in uneven silver waves. His hands, large, weathered, trembled at his sides. The receptionist looked up, looked him over, looked back, Doan. Silas stepped to the counter. Excuse me, ma'am, could you point me toward the VA clinic? I think I took the wrong bus. The receptionist waved vaguely toward the street. 2 blocks south, I think. Maybe 3. She didn't look up again. Silas nodded and turned to leave. From the back station, Lila watched. She saw the tremor in his hands, the pin on his jacket, the way he held himself, straight-backed, dignified, even as the world told him he was invisible. She crossed the salon floor. Sir? Silas stopped. When's the last time you had a haircut? He blinked. Oh, I wasn't looking for. I've got an open chair. Lila gestured toward her station. Sit down. He hesitated. She didn't. Please. Silas Reed sat down in the last chair at Prestige Salon and Spa, and for the next while, something shifted. Lila draped the cape around his shoulders, ran warm water through his hair. Her fingers moved the way her grandfather had taught her, slow at first, reading the scalp, finding the natural line before the clippers touched skin. Silas closed his eyes. How long has it been? She asked quietly. Since a haircut? A long time. Didn't seem to matter much. He paused. My wife used to remind me every so often like clockwork. Silas, you're starting to look like a stray dog. A small, broken laugh. She passed some time ago. May. After that, I guess I stopped caring about a lot of things. Lila's hands didn't stop moving. Clippers hummed. Hair fell. I'm sorry about your wife, sir. She was something. His voice thinned. Kept everything together. The house, me. After she was gone, I just sat there, in the same chair, watching the same window. Lila worked in silence for a moment, shaping the fade above his ears. Clean, precise, the kind of cut that gives a man back some years. My grandfather was military, she said. Barber for his whole unit for many years. He always told me the best conversations happen in a barber's chair. Silas opened his eyes and looked at her reflection in the mirror. Smart man. The smartest I ever knew, she finished. She removed the cape and brushed the cuttings from his collar. When she stepped back, the man in the mirror was different, sharper, cleaner, present. Silas stared at himself like he was meeting someone he'd forgotten. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. Inside, a few crumpled bills. Maybe $8, maybe less. It was everything he had, and they both knew it. Lila placed her hand over his. This one's on me, sir. Thank you for your service. Silas's chin trembled. He didn't speak. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a creased photograph, a woman with kind eyes and silver hair, laughing at something outside the frame. "May," he said. "She would have liked you." He put the photograph back, stood, nodded once, and walked out the front door into the afternoon light. The clippers were still warm in Lila's hand when Monica appeared behind her. "My office. Now." The door closed. Monica didn't sit. "What did I tell you? No walk-ins, no freebies. That man wasn't even a client. He's a veteran, Monica. He needed a haircut. And I need a business that doesn't look like a charity. You're done, Lila. Pack your things. No warning, no discussion. Done." Lila packed her station in silence. Clippers, combs, cape, the notebook with the hand-drawn logo, and the floor plans, and years of a dream folded between the pages. She walked out with her head high and her eyes dry. The other stylists watched. Not one of them said a word. Lila's key turned the lock. She hadn't been home this early on a weekday in some time. Etta was sitting at the kitchen table with a crossword puzzle and a cup of tea that had gone cold some time ago. She looked up and read her granddaughter's face the way she read weather. Fast, accurate. No second guess needed. What happened? It wasn't a question. Lila set her bag off the counter. The clippers clinked against the notebook inside. She told it straight. The old man, the haircut, the free cut, Monica's office, the walkout. No embellishment, no tears, just facts laid end to end like dominoes. Etta didn't interrupt. When Lila finished, the old woman set her pen down slowly. "You did what your grandfather would have done. Don't you dare feel ashamed." "I'm not ashamed, Grandma, I'm broke." The math was simple and merciless. No income, little in the account, rent due soon, already overdue for some time. Without a paycheck, they had only a short while before the landlord stopped being patient. That night, Lila sat at the kitchen table with her phone and a list of every salon within bus distance. She called many. The first several weren't hiring. One said they'd call back. They didn't. Another hung up after she mentioned Prestige Salon. Another answered. The owner paused when Lila gave her work history. "Prestige? Monica Hale's place?" "Yes, ma'am, I was there for some time." "Honey, Monica already called around. Told everyone you were unreliable. Said you had a pattern of giving away services without authorization. A beat. I'm sorry. I can't take that risk." The line went dead. Lila stared at the phone in her hand. Not just fired, blacklisted. Etta's voice drifted from the living room. Casual. Almost too casual. "Baby, did that man say his name?" Lila looked up. "Silas. He said his name was Silas." Etta was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's a good name. Old-fashioned. The kind of name that belongs to somebody." She didn't say anything else, but something in her voice made Lila pause. A weight. A knowing quality. As if the name meant more than 4 letters and 2 syllables. It didn't. Etta had never heard of Silas Reed in her life. But the audience doesn't know that yet. Now, the other side of town. Richmond City Hall. Same evening. Different world. Mayor Everett Reed sat behind a polished oak desk wide enough to land a small plane on. Behind him, framed commendations, a wall of handshake photographs with senators, governors, a former vice president, and a window overlooking the city he ran. On his desk, a proposal for a new community development initiative. The title, printed in bold across the cover page, Small Business Uplift, Investing in Underserved Neighborhoods. His assistant knocked. "Your sister called again. She says your dad isn't doing well." Everett's jaw tightened. His pen stopped moving. "I'll call her back." He didn't. Later that night, alone in his office, Everett's phone buzzed. Lorna. He let it ring a few times before answering. "Everett, I'm serious. Dad's not eating. He barely leaves the apartment. He's been like this since Mom died, and you know it." "I know, Lorna. You'll what? Call him? When? You haven't visited in years, not since the funeral. The one you showed up late to because you had a campaign event. Silence. He's your father, Everett. I said I'll handle it. He hung up. Sat in the dark office. The proposal on his desk glowed under the desk lamp. Small business uplift. And the irony would have been poetic if anyone had been watching. But no one was. Not yet. One day, soon after, Lila did the only thing she knew how to do. She set up a folding chair on the sidewalk. It wasn't much. A metal chair from the kitchen, a plastic cape she'd bought at the dollar store. Her clippers plugged into an extension cord that snaked through the apartment window and into the living room outlet. A hand-lettered cardboard sign leaned against the stoop. Haircuts. Pay what you can. Churchill noticed. The first customer was Mr. Harlan from the building, an older retired postal worker who hadn't had a proper trim in months because his hands shook too much to do it himself. He sat down, suspicious. How much? Whatever you got, Mr. Harlan. He handed her a small bill and a sleeve of butter cookies his daughter had baked. Lila gave him the cleanest cut he'd had in a long while. He stood up, touched the back of his neck, and said, "Girl, you better not be out here tomorrow. I'm sending everybody I know." He did. Soon there was a line. Neighbors from the building. Elderly men from the Baptist church nearby. A teenager named Darius, who needed a shape-up before his first job interview at the grocery store. A single mother who brought her twin boys and paid with a bag of rice and a jar of homemade jam. Etta set up a card table next to the chair and started bringing out lemonade in a plastic pitcher. A neighbor named Otis dragged over a portable radio tuned to the oldies station. By the end of that first stretch, the sidewalk in front of Lila's building looked less like a makeshift barber shop and more like a block party that happened to include haircuts. Lila wasn't making real money. A little here, a little there. Sometimes nothing at all. But she was building something she couldn't name yet. Something that felt like the sketches in her notebook come to life in rough draft form. Community. Trust. A chair where anyone could sit. On another day, Silas came back. He'd been looking for her. Asked around at the salon. They wouldn't tell him anything. Asked at the VA clinic. Finally, a woman at the bus stop recognized Lila's description and pointed him toward Church Hill. He walked up to the sidewalk chair, hat in hand, looking like a man carrying a debt he didn't know how to repay. "I heard what happened," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to cause you trouble, young lady." Lila was mid-cut on a young boy who wouldn't stop fidgeting. She didn't look up. "You didn't cause anything, Mr. Silas. My boss made her choice. I made mine." She paused, met his eyes. "I'd make the same one again." Silas stood there for a moment. Then he sat down on the stoop and waited. When the boy was done, Lila patted the chair. "You're next." "I can't let you." "Sit down, Mr. Silas." He sat. She draped the cape. The clippers hummed. And for the second time, the world around them went quiet. Etta watched from the window upstairs and said nothing. But she smiled. A few days later, a dark green sedan pulled to the curb on Church Hill, and a man got out holding a microphone and a press badge. Miles Corbin, local TV reporter for the channel. He'd been driving through the neighborhood to cover something else when he saw the line of people on the sidewalk and the woman with clippers in her hand. He watched for a bit before approaching. "Excuse me, I'm Miles Corbin. Mind if I ask what's going on here?" Lila looked at the microphone like it was a snake. "Just cutting hair." "On the sidewalk?" "On the sidewalk," Miles smiled. "There's a story here. Would you let me do a short segment? Human interest." Lila shook her head. "I'm not looking for attention." From behind her, Etta's voice rang out like a church bell. "Tell your story, baby. The truth has legs." Lila looked at her grandmother, looked at Miles, looked at the line of people waiting in folding chairs and on stoops, people who'd shown up for her when no one else would. Fine. Miles set up the camera. Lila stood in front of her sidewalk chair, hands steady, voice clear. She didn't trash Monica. She didn't play the victim. She spoke the way she cut hair, precise, honest, no wasted motion. I was raised to believe that when someone's hurting, and you can help, you help. I helped a veteran who needed a haircut. I'd do it again, but I lost my job for it. And now no salon in this city will hire me. So I'm out here. Miles turned the camera to Silas, who was sitting on the stoop with a cup of Etta's lemonade. This young woman treated me like a human being, Silas said. His voice was steady but thin. That's all she did. Nobody else in that salon even looked at me. The segment aired on the evening news that day. By later that night, it had been shared widely on local social media. By the next morning, many people had seen Lila Vance's face and heard her say the words, "I'd do it again." The next day, across town, Everett Reed was being prepped for a budget meeting when his assistant walked in holding a tablet. "Sir, you should see this." Everett took the tablet absently. A news clip. Some local story. A woman cutting hair on a sidewalk. He half-watched, already thinking about the meeting, until the camera panned to an old man sitting on a stoop. Everett's hand stopped. The old man was holding a cup of lemonade, wearing a clean but worn jacket, a military pin on the lapel, pale blue eyes that Everett had known his entire life. "That's my father." The assistant looked up. "Sir? That man?" Everett's voice dropped. "On the news, that's my father." He watched the full segment twice. His face moved through something. Shock first, then guilt, then a quiet, private anger that had nowhere to go but inward. He picked up his phone, put it down, picked it up again. He called Lorna. "Why didn't you tell me he was—" "I've been telling you, Everett." Her voice was flat, exhausted. "You haven't been listening." The line went quiet. Everett stared at the frozen frame on the tablet. His father's face on a sidewalk in Church Hill being cared for by a stranger. The most powerful man in Richmond had never felt smaller. For a while the world was kind. The news segment brought a small wave of new faces to the sidewalk chair. People Lila had never met drove across town with cash in hand and stories on their lips. A retired teacher from another part of town left extra for a trim. A church group dropped off a box of supplies, capes, combs, disinfectant, a handwritten card that read, "Keep going, sister." Someone started a collection jar at the corner store without asking. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was enough to cover some bills and buy a bit more time before the landlord ran out of patience. That evening, Lila and Etta sat across from each other at the kitchen table. Fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread. The first real dinner they'd cooked in weeks, instead of scraping together whatever was cheapest. The apartment smelled like butter and garlic, and something close to normal. Etta set down her fork and looked at her granddaughter. "Your grandfather used to say, 'The chair doesn't care who sits in it. Rich, poor, black, white. Everybody needs somebody to make them feel human.'" Lila smiled. He said that a lot, because it was true a lot. The next morning, Silas showed up at the apartment door. Not for a haircut this time. He was holding a small potted plant, green leaves, terracotta pot, a little crooked from the bus ride over. "May always said a new beginning deserves something green." He held it out like an offering. "I don't know if this counts as a new beginning, but it felt like one." Lila took the plant, held it with both hands. "It counts, Mr. Silas." She placed it on the kitchen windowsill, where the morning light came through strongest. That same night, across town, Everett Reed sat alone in his home office. The house was dark. His wife was asleep. The news segment played on his laptop for the fourth time. His father's face filled the screen. Pale blue eyes, clean haircut, the ghost of a smile Everett hadn't seen in years. He opened his phone, scrolled to the contact labeled Dad. His thumb hovered over the green button. He closed the phone. Not tonight. It took Victor Langford only a short time to smell blood. Victor was a city council member from Richmond's 3rd District, a man who'd spent the last couple of years looking for a crack in Everett Reed's armor and finding nothing. Everett was careful, polished, popular, the kind of mayor who said the right things, shook the right hands, and never left a loose thread hanging, until now. Victor watched the news segment several times, leaning forward in his chair a little more with each replay. A young black woman fired for helping an old man, a veteran living alone, struggling. And the kicker, the old man's last name, Reed. Same as the mayor. A phone call to a contact at the VA confirmed what Victor already suspected. He called a press conference for the next morning. "The mayor of this city," Victor said, standing behind a cluster of microphones on the steps of City Hall, "has built his entire platform on community uplift, on caring for the vulnerable, on family values." He let the words settle. But his own father, a military veteran, is living in a one-bedroom apartment alone in poverty. And a young woman lost her job for doing what the mayor's own family wouldn't, showing Silas Reed basic human decency. He paused, looked directly into the cameras. Where was the mayor? Where was the son? The story detonated. Soon, national outlets had picked it up. By evening, Lila Vance's name was trending. Social media split into camps, those who called Lila a hero and those stoked by the political framing who called the whole thing a stunt. Comment sections turned into battlefields. Opinion pieces launched before anyone had all the facts. Lila, who had wanted nothing more than to cut hair on a sidewalk and pay her rent, was suddenly at the center of a firestorm she hadn't asked for and couldn't control. The ugliness came fast. Online trolls flooded her social media, accounts she barely used, with racist slurs, accusations, threats. Someone wrote that she'd staged the whole thing for a scam. Someone else posted her home address. One morning, Lila walked outside to set up the sidewalk chair and found a spray-painted word on the brick wall next to her building door. A single, ugly word. Red paint still wet. She stood there for a moment. Then she got a rag and a bucket of soapy water and scrubbed it off before Etta could see it. That same afternoon, Monica Hale appeared on a local podcast. The host lobbed her soft questions, and Monica swung hard. Lila was fired for repeated policy violations, Monica said, her voice smooth and rehearsed. She had a pattern of insubordination. The free haircut was the last straw, not the only one. I run a business, not a charity. Lila watched the clip on her phone that night, sitting on the edge of her bed. Her hands shook, not from anger, from something deeper, the feeling of being erased, rewritten, turned into a character in someone else's story. Etta walked in, saw the screen, and turned it off. Don't let them rewrite your story, baby. They don't have the pen. The next morning, Silas appeared at Lila's door. He wasn't wearing his jacket. His eyes were red. He looked like a man who hadn't slept. "I'm so sorry," he said. "This is all my fault. If I hadn't walked into that salon—" "Mr. Silas, please." Lila stepped aside to let him in. "You needed a haircut. That's all. None of this is your fault." Silas sat down at this kitchen table. Etta brought him coffee without being asked. He wrapped both hands around the mug and stared at it for a long time. Then, quietly, "My son is the mayor." The apartment went still. Lila blinked. "What?" Everett Reed. He's my son." Silas's voice was barely above a whisper. "We haven't spoken in years, not since his mother's funeral. I'm telling you because you deserve to know the truth, and because I think it's time I stopped hiding from it." Lila sat down across from him. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then, "Why are you telling me this, Mr. Silas?" "Because they're using you to get to him, and you didn't sign up for that. Neither did I." A couple of days later, the trap arrived. A woman Lila had never met showed up at the sidewalk barber shop, well-dressed, professional, carrying a business card that read, "Community Advocacy Partners." She said she represented a group that wanted to help Lila fund a wrongful termination lawsuit against Prestige Salon, get her on national television, set up a legal defense fund, all of it pro bono. "We believe in your story, Lila. We want to make this right." It sounded like salvation. It smelled like politics. Lila took the card. That night she showed it to Etta. Etta turned the card over in her fingers. "Who benefits from you being angry, baby? You or them?" Lila thought about Silas sitting at her kitchen table, telling her the truth with shaking hands. She thought about Everett Reed, a man she'd never met, whose father had been kinder to her than her own employer. She thought about the word on the wall, and the podcast, and the comments, and the cameras, and all the people who wanted to use her pain as a weapon. She called the number on the card the next morning. "Thank you for the offer, but I'm not interested." "Lila, you don't understand what we can do for—" "I understand fine. I'm not going to be anybody's weapon. Not against an old man's son." She hung up. Etta, listening from the kitchen doorway, nodded once. Your grandfather would have said the same thing. Silas Reed had not asked his daughter for anything in years. Not money, not company, not even a phone call on his birthday. He was a proud man, and pride had a way of building walls that looked like strength from the outside and felt like prison from within. But on a morning, he took the bus to Lorna Reed's house in the West End, knocked on her door, and asked for help. Not for himself. "She lost her job because of me," Silas said, sitting at Lorna's dining room table with a cup of tea he hadn't touched. "She's being dragged through the mud, people saying things about her online, her old boss lying about her on the radio. And you know what she did when they offered her money to go after Everett?" He shook his head. "She said no, turned it down flat. Said she wouldn't be used as a weapon against an old man's son." Lorna sat across from him watching her father's face. She hadn't seen him this animated in years. Since before Mom died. Since before the silence swallowed everything. "She's a good person, Lorna. Better than all of us. Dad, I'm not asking you to fix my life. I've made my peace with how things are between me and Everett. But this girl doesn't deserve what's happening to her. And your son is the only person in this city with the power to do something about it." Lorna drove to City Hall that afternoon. She didn't call ahead. Didn't schedule a meeting. She walked past Everett's assistant with the kind of authority that only a sister who changed your diapers could carry, and closed the office door behind her. Everett looked up from his desk. "Lorna, I'm in the middle of—" "Dad came to see me." Everett stopped. "Not about you. Not about the news. Not about any of this political circus." She sat down across from him, uninvited. "He came to ask me to help the woman who cut his hair. The one who got fired. The one who's being torn apart right now because she did something decent." Everett leaned back. His face was a mask, but the crack was showing. In the tightness around his eyes, in the way his hands gripped the armrest. "This isn't about politics anymore, Everett. Dad came to me because he couldn't come to you. He's not asking you to fix his life. He's asking you to help someone else. A stranger showed him more kindness than his own son has in years." She let that land. "Sit with that." Everett said nothing. Lorna stood. She was halfway to the door when she turned back. "He's not angry at you, Everett. He's proud of you. He told that reporter on camera. The whole city heard it." Her voice softened. "But pride doesn't keep you warm when you're alone." The door clicked shut behind her. Everett sat in the silence for a long time. Across town, Miles Corbin was working late. The original story had been a short human interest segment, but the political explosion had turned it into something bigger, and Miles could feel the real story underneath the noise. Not the politics, not the mayor's family drama, but something rotten at the core of Prestige Salon and Spa. He started making calls. Former employees, ex-clients, anyone who'd worked at that salon in recent years. The picture came together fast. Several former stylists confirmed independently that Monica Hale routinely turned away walk-in clients based on appearance. One of them, a woman named Carla who'd quit some time earlier, provided screenshots of a group text from Monica sent the week before the political fundraiser booking. "We can't have people like that in here when the council people come. Keep it clean. You know what I mean? People like that." Miles read the message several times. Then he pulled the city's public records on small business grants issued under Everett Reed's Community Uplift program. It took little time to find what he was looking for. Prestige Salon and Spa had received a grant some time ago. The application, signed by Monica Hale, contained a section titled Community Commitment Statement, in which she pledged to provide accessible, inclusive services to all Richmond residents, regardless of income or background. A salon that took public money to serve the community had fired someone for doing exactly that. Miles saved the file, picked up his phone. He had one more call to make. Soon after Lila Vance was fired for giving away a haircut, Mayor Everett Reed called a press conference. The City Hall press room was standing room only. Every local outlet, national networks, bloggers, podcasters, citizen journalists with phone cameras held high. In the back row, Victor Langford sat with his arms crossed and a thin smile on his face, already composing the press release he'd send the moment Everett stumbled. Miles Corbin stood near the front, notebook open, pen still. Everett walked to the podium. No notes, no teleprompter, no flag pin, no rehearsed smile, no aide whispering in his ear. He gripped the edges of the lectern and looked out at the room, and for the first time since this story began, the mayor of Richmond didn't look like a politician. He looked like a man who hadn't slept. "I'm not here to talk about policy today." The room shifted. Pens stopped. "I'm here to talk about something I should have talked about a long time ago." He took a breath. "Silas Reed is my father." The murmur rolled through the room like a wave. Victor uncrossed his arms. Miles didn't move. "He's an older man. He's a veteran. He served this country. And when he came home, he built a life, raised 2 children, loved a woman named May for many years, and never once asked anyone for anything." Everett paused. "And I failed him. I didn't fail him because I'm the mayor. I failed him because I'm his son, and I stopped showing up. I let ambition build a wall between me and the man who raised me. I missed dinners, birthdays, holidays. I showed up late to my own mother's funeral because I had a campaign event I thought couldn't wait." His voice cracked. He caught it. It could have waited. Everything could have waited. He looked down at his hands on the lectern, then back up. "Some time ago, a young woman named Lila Vance did something I should have been doing. She saw my father, not as a political talking point, not as an inconvenience, not as somebody to look past, but as a person, a human being who needed to be seen. She gave him a haircut. She gave him some of her time and the kind of dignity that shouldn't be remarkable, but somehow is." Everett's jaw tightened, and she was punished for it. She was fired. She was blacklisted from every salon in this city. She was attacked online, called things I won't repeat in this room. Her former employer went on a podcast and lied about her record. And through all of it, Lila Vance didn't lash out. She didn't file a lawsuit. She didn't sell her story. She set up a chair on a sidewalk and kept cutting hair. He let that sit. She was offered money to publicly condemn me. She turned it down. A young woman with student debt and months of back rent turned down the easiest payday of her life because she refused to be used as a weapon against a man she'd never met, because that man was the father of the old man she'd helped. The room was so quiet that the hum of the air conditioning sounded loud. I don't deserve that kind of grace, but Lila Vance gave it anyway. Not to me, to my father. Everett straightened. When he spoke again, his voice was no longer breaking. It was clear. Today, I'm announcing 3 actions. First, a formal review of all small business grants issued under the city's Community Uplift Program to ensure that every recipient is upholding the community service standards they pledge to meet. That review will begin with Prestige Salon and Spa, which received a grant some time ago while maintaining practices that are the opposite of inclusive. Victor's smile disappeared. Second, a new micro-grant initiative for independent cosmetologists and barbers in underserved neighborhoods funded through the existing Uplift program. If we're going to talk about community investment, we need to put money in the hands of people who are actually doing the work. Miles was writing fast. Third, and this is not from the mayor's office, this is from me personally. I owe Lila Vance an apology. Not because my office failed her, although it did, because I failed her, because I wasn't there for the man she helped when I should have been. He paused, looked directly into the center camera, and said words that would be replayed, shared, printed, and quoted for months to come. Kindness shouldn't cost your livelihood, not in my city. 2 seconds of silence, then applause. Not polite applause, not political applause, but the kind that comes from the chest. That evening, Everett drove across town to a 1-bedroom apartment he hadn't visited in years. The building was smaller than he remembered. The hallway smelled like old carpet and someone's dinner. He stood in front of the apartment door and knocked. Silas opened the door. He was wearing a clean shirt. His hair was neat. Lila's cut, still holding its shape. Father and son looked at each other for a long moment. Years of silence standing between them like furniture in a dark room. "You look tired, son." "I am, Dad." Silas stepped aside. Everett walked in. The apartment was small, tidy, and quiet. A single lamp on, a bowl of soup on the stove. On the kitchen counter in a simple frame, the photograph of May, kind eyes, silver hair, laughing at something just out of view. Everett picked it up. Held it carefully, the way you hold something you've been afraid to touch. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. For the funeral. For everything after." Silas sat down at the table. "You're here now." They didn't solve everything that night. That's not how it works. Not in real life. Not in this story. Years of silence don't dissolve over one bowl of soup. But Everett stayed. He sat across from his father at the small kitchen table, and they ate reheated soup and bread. And they talked about small things. The weather, the neighborhood, a bird that had been building a nest on Silas's windowsill. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. The next week, Miles Corbin's full investigative piece aired on the channel. Former employees, text messages, grant records. The phrase, "people like that," played on screen several times. Prestige Salon and Spa faced a formal city audit. The grant was suspended pending review. The corporate fundraiser pulled out. Clients canceled. Appointments emptied. Monica Hale didn't lose her salon, but she lost something harder to replace: her reputation, her credibility, and the comfortable fiction that what she'd done was just business. She sat alone in her empty salon on an afternoon, staring at the chair by the back wall. Lila's old station, the smallest one, the one that used to be the busiest seat in the shop. It was empty now, and it stayed that way. Later, Lila Vance stood on a sidewalk again, but this time the chair was inside. The storefront on Broad Street wasn't much. Some square feet, a cracked tile floor she'd mopped several times, and windows wide enough to catch the morning sun from both directions. The previous tenant had been a tax preparer. Before that, a shoe repair shop. Before that, nobody remembered. But today, it was hers. The sign went up that morning. 2 men from the neighborhood lifted it into the brackets above the door, while Etta supervised from the sidewalk, pointing and correcting as if she'd hung signs her whole life. Vance's, a chair for everyone. Inside, 2 Barber chairs sat side by side. The first was brand new, chrome and black leather, bought with the city's micro grant and a small community fundraiser that Miles's viewers had organized quickly. The second was older, worn leather, heavy iron base, a small scratch on the right armrest where a generation of hands had rested. It had belonged to Staff Sergeant Amos Vance, and a neighbor named Otis had spent time restoring it in his garage without being asked. On the wall behind the chairs, a framed photograph of Lila's grandfather in army dress uniform. Beside it, a small hand-lettered sign: Veterans always cut free. On the windowsill, a potted plant with green leaves in a terracotta pot, a little crooked from a bus ride. Silas was the first customer. He walked in that morning, wearing a clean jacket, his military pin on the lapel. He sat down in the antique chair, his chair now, though no one had said so out loud, and Lila draped the cape around his shoulders. "The usual, Mr. Silas?" He looked at her in the mirror and smiled, a real smile, the kind his face had forgotten how to make for some time. The usual. The clippers hummed. Hair fell. The radio played something soft. The bell above the door rang. Everett Reed walked in. Not in a suit, not with cameras, not as the mayor, just a man in a jacket carrying a small potted plant. He set it on the counter. "My father tells me this is what you give for new beginnings." Lila looked at the plant, looked at Silas, looked at Everett. She took it with both hands and placed it in the window next to the first one. It is. The shop filled slowly through the morning. Old neighbors from Church Hill, new faces from across town. A teenager getting a shape-up, an elderly woman who just wanted to sit and watch, people of all backgrounds filling the chairs, filling the room, filling the space with the sound of clippers and conversation and laughter. Etta sat by the door with a pitcher of lemonade and a look on her face that said everything she'd never say out loud. The chair didn't care who sat in it. It never had. Eventually, Vance's barber shop had employees, a waiting list on busy days, and a jar of lemonade that Etta refilled every morning. Whether anyone asked or not, Silas came in regularly, same chair, same time. He'd become a fixture, reading the newspaper in the corner, greeting every customer by name, telling stories about May to anyone who'd listen. Sometimes Everett came with him, not every time, but enough. They were not fully healed. Years of silence don't vanish in a year, but they were talking. They were trying. And for now, that was enough. Lila swept the floor at the end of a long day. The shop was empty. The radio played low. She paused, leaning on the broom, and looked at the photograph of her grandfather on the wall. Staff Sergeant Amos Vance, the man who taught her that a barber's chair was the most honest place in the world. She smiled. turned off the lights, locked the door. Outside, the sign glowed in the streetlight. A chair for everyone. Lila Vance didn't set out to change anything. She just gave an old man a haircut. But that's the thing about kindness. You never know whose life you're about to touch or whose heart you're about to unlock. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one, because stories like this, they're out there, and they deserve to be told. Lila lost her job, got blacklisted, all because she gave an old veteran a free haircut. But you know what she told me straight? I would do it again. And that right there is the whole story. Look, Monica Hale took public money, signed a paper saying she would serve the community, and then fired a girl for serving the community. That tells you everything. Some people wear kindness like a costume. Lila wears it as life skin, because her grandfather spent years cutting hair for soldiers and never took a dime. That's not a skill, that's blood. And when the politicians came knocking, offering lawyers, money, cameras, trying to turn her pain into a weapon against the mayor, she said no. A young woman with debt, rent late, and she still said no because she wasn't about to let somebody use her hurt to hurt an old man's son. That's the part that gets me. Lila didn't just show kindness to hurt. She showed it to the people trying to destroy her, too, by refusing to become what they wanted her to be. So I got to ask you something real. Who taught you to care? Your mama? Your grandma? A stranger who showed up when nobody else did? And the harder question, are you still living what they taught you? Tell me in the comments. Share this, like, and subscribe. And remember, a good chair never asked who's sitting in it.